This is Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And speaking about turning uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage, this is my second attempt with Rachel. She was nice enough to come back. I tried to do this from my car on the way to the Atlanta airport a couple of weeks ago, and it was just a no-go with the internet. So thanks for being a trooper, and welcome back, Rachel.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I mean, I was excited to talk to you before, but that didn't quite work out. But the universe brought us back, and that's all that matters.
That's right. Well, I know we've got a great show. I mean, I want to talk about your previous career, you beginning a startup, what you had to go through funding, but most importantly, really talking about the work you do as a relationship and a communications and a connections expert. Welcome to the show, Rachel DeAlto, and excited to have you here today.
I'm so psyched to be here. Can't wait for our conversation, truly.
Okay, so you are an attorney, the founder of a startup, a motivational speaker. Tell us a little bit about you and your path to getting here. I mean, you're also kind of a media icon, for lack of a better way to put it.
Oh my God, that word makes me feel uncomfortable. I was like, stop it. It's so weird. Nothing was intentional, which is odd because I'm so much a fan and I speak on intentionality, and I look back on my career and I think the intention was just to do good work, and it just led me to these random places, and I feel like it was such a roller coaster. But yeah, I was, as you mentioned, I was an attorney. I was a litigator and came up with an idea for a startup company that I thought I would just run on the side, and ended up actually oversold our private placement, raised almost $2 million. And we launched it as a little over 10 years ago. And it led to a lot of media interest. We were on the front page of the New York Times, we were in the Wall Street Journal. Oprah called. It was her last season in Chicago. And I was like, what is happening here? And
right.
Yeah, it was just bizarre. I'm like, this isn't real life. I was like, I'm an attorney running a company. And I started doing TV around the company, which then led into a TV career, which then led me into my speaking career. So it wasn't really, I didn't set out and be like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do A, B, C, D to do it, because that's how my brain works. Instead, it was like, oh no, we're going to figure this out.
So were you practicing law and happy practicing law, and this idea just came up to you, or were you looking to do something different?
I wasn't looking. I actually loved the firm that I was in. I still spend a lot of time with a lot of the attorneys in the firm that I was practicing at. Still really good friends with my boss, work out with my other colleagues still. And so I loved it. We had such a really great environment, and I really had no desire to leave until I was shown what was on the other side. And I started this business, and I've always been in business. Normal children have a lemonade stand. It was called Candy Plus, and it was a full convenience store at the bottom of my driveway, where when I didn't open, they'd show up on my doorstep, my neighbors, and be like, is Rachel opening today? It was the weirdest thing. So yeah, I've always loved business, and it just I got this trajectory, which it just changed, based on kind of the opportunities that arose.
But when you became a lawyer, you became a litigator. So you weren't necessarily doing business law unless you were litigating for business. So where did you have much experience in raising money and raising capital? Funding a startup is not an easy thing to do. So
yeah, no, it was very foreign to me. So we actually hired people to one of the firms that I had worked at during law school, we hired to help with the private placement and all of the things that I don't understand. Because the one thing that I know is that I know nothing, at the end of the day. Right. And honestly, I think that kind of that learner mindset has served me well, where it was kind of, you embrace the things that you can kind of grasp and get a hold of. And there's a lot of stuff, especially with the startups and financials and all of those elements that clueless. I mean, you figure it out over time, but if you want to do it right. So we hired the right people in that case.
I love what you said there, and I really don't want to skip over it, because for anybody listening, it's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders and business owners make, is that you just don't admit that you don't know. Every time I hire, even somebody to work on my website or to do a video for me or to do whatever, my first comment is always, you tell me what to do. You're the expert here.
Yes.
That is not I'm very clear on what I'm good at and very clear on what I'm not good at.
Yes. And I learn every day new things that I'm not good at.
So how did you get into, I understand the transition that obviously, I mean, you're a female, you were, you still are, but a young female at the time, you raised money for this business, which you don't see a lot of young females getting funded. And I do a little angel investing on the side, and it's not easy, and there's certainly a big focus on that. But how did you make what was exactly the transition into media? And then I want to understand why relationships and connections.
Yes. So the media transition was, again, completely unintentional. I started doing TV around the company. And so backtracking a little bit, all of these things that I paid for back here were legitimate degrees, but the real degree that I wanted, I actually just wanted to be an actress when I was growing up.
Oh.
And so it's kind of funny. There was this full circle moment where I was like, the first TV appearances I'm doing, I was like, this is amazing. Like, you do my hair and makeup. I will come on every day and talk if you do lashes.
Right.
And so I just kind of fell into it, and it felt so good and it felt so natural. And it was just a natural component of my personality to start doing it. And so I'm doing these interviews on the company, and they're saying, hey, can you come back and give your opinions on XYZ? And I said, you keep doing this. I was like, I will come back. I got opinions on everything. Just ask my family. And so I started doing these segments. I mean, if you Google way back, I think I've been called I was like a parenting expert. My kids will not vouch for that one. I've done segments on everything. And so I just fell in love with it. And that more begets more in terms of media. And so it was just more opportunities. And then eventually I had an agent, and I was like, wait a second, I could get paid for this.
Right.
It was pretty epic. So yeah, I fell into relationships because the startup that I founded was in the dating space. And so it was pre-app dating, and got completely consumed within a year and a half by Tinder, because that was when Tinder came out. And so it died on the vine pretty quickly, and just the intellectual property didn't stand up. And so it kind of went to the wayside, but I fell in love with this personal development space. And I just saw the power of connections and the power of relationships. And I really started to think about how it applied and how I've been utilizing it in, my previous iterations, which as a lawyer, I was in litigation, which is not exactly the most relationship building kind of field.
Yes, exactly.
But I mediated, most cases mediate, most cases settle. And so I was really pulling from a lot of those different elements, and it really did tie in more together than it seemed from the outside.
Yeah. So when it comes to relationships, I mean, there you are, your relationships and a connections expert. COVID hits, and we flip into what is this virtual world, and you even take COVID out of it. I mean, we just become a world where everything seems to be, electronic. I mean, honestly, I could just text to get everything I want in my life and probably never, ever have to talk to a human being again as long as I live. Kind of, how do you navigate, and how do you talk about all that? And then I'm assuming still trying to convince people that, I mean, I'm amazed. I think I don't care how virtual we get or how technology dependent. We're human beings, and human beings are all about connection, and it's how I see things happen. So what are your thoughts and kind of your take on that?
Oh my gosh, so many thoughts. And it was a really trying period, but I also thought that it brought a lot to the surface. It was underlying. And the fact of the matter is, like you said, we are human beings, and we are biologically wired for connection. And the challenge that we really faced is that we were already becoming the loneliest humans. We were already our generational gaps in terms of loneliness is growing. And there's so many people that are really missing that connection that they think that they're getting from technology. I love technology. Are you kidding me? I am a Gen Xer who doesn't want to pick up the phone and make an appointment. Can I do this online? Because otherwise I don't want to get a massage from you.
Right.
But so I get it, but also I know that there's so much power in connection. So we saw we were already having a loneliness epidemic before COVID. And then really, as we entered into it, we saw the rising mental health crisis. We saw the rise in depression and anxiety rates through all ages. And to me, all that did was just re-shine the light that our priority is on people, and our priority should be on those connections. And so for many people, I think there was kind of this great awakening of, wow, this actually matters. And I know, I'm sure you've seen this, and I know I've seen this when you go to an organization who's meeting for the first time in a year and a half, they're so excited. It's like, I don't even have to bring the energy, because the energy's there, because they just love being together. And it doesn't mean that they want to be together 40 hours a week. That's actually a whole other conversation.
Right.
But they want to be together to an extent to feed off of each other, to connect with each other, because we're so much more powerful in person.
Yeah, I think that's amazing too. Like when we first started to get back out on the road, and people would say, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "This is the easiest thing I've ever done," because I could honestly get up and talk about how to put together a cardboard box. Nobody cares. I mean, they're so excited to be together. They're going to give you a standing ovation. They think you're amazing. But so, I really do believe that we are hardwired to want to connect, to want to be in person. I mean, I think all you have to do is watch little children, and the moment little children go into a room, they'll start to run to the people they don't know, or the people who look the most different from them. I mean, they just want to, and they become friends, like that. So, but at the same time, while we're hardwired like that, how are you helping companies and leaders navigate this whole idea that people don't want to come to work, and they want this flexibility, yet how do you ever really groom people for leadership positions or things like that if they don't have that in-person connection?
Well, it's kind of twofold. One, we have to have some empathy for the perspective of the employees who now have a taste for something they never tasted before. If you never had chocolate, and then all of a sudden you had the most amazing chocolate bar, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't live without this chocolate." It's kind of like work from home for a lot of people. Are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I could have this balance. I didn't realize I could walk my dog to clear my head and then come back and get stuff done. And I didn't realize I could be as productive away from my office before and have some more flexibility in my life." So for many, it's just recognizing that we've changed. People are now eating chocolate, and you can't take the chocolate away. You take the chocolate away, I don't know about you, Meredith, but I'm going to take you down.
Right.
I will find somebody else who's going to give me my chocolate.
Yeah,
and
right.
So, if you think about it like that, we've given people the opportunity to show that we can do something different. So looking at it from that different perspective, but the studies show over and over again that we still need in-person connection. So it's even more important for people to, sharpen the pencils and get on paper. Like, how does hybrid work for us? How do we find efficiency? How do we do more retreats? How do we do more, ways that people can engage in person that doesn't feel like an obligation? And I find that most people I talk to, they're willing to go hybrid. They're willing to come in for employee engagement events. It's just, I don't want to have to do the grind, because I realize I don't have to. And chocolate is delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I do think that kind of finding that most of my clients are finding that hybrid, like even having one day a week where everybody comes into the office, because that's the day that you connect and you build those relationships, but having that flexibility really the rest of the time. One of the things that I think is really interesting when you talk about relationships and connections is that it's something we all know we need to do. Yet the moment that you say networking, I literally can just hear the energy suck right out of the room. Right. And so what are some of the biggest challenges or some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to relationships and when it comes to connections?
It's interesting. So I think one of the biggest things that just starts screaming in my head as soon as you start asking that question is how much we make it about us. So often we show up to a connection, we show up to a relationship, we show up to a LinkedIn profile, and all of a sudden you're in there asking for something and you don't know this person. And so, if we approach relationships from a place of service, if we approach that connection from a place of genuine curiosity, if we just connected for the sake of connecting, knowing that, hey, listen, I'm not an idiot. I know that down the road, maybe this is going to turn into something else, but it doesn't have to be the forefront. We can have multifaceted relationships and connections that provide different things at different times, but we have to be authentic and organic about it. So that's the biggest challenge. And it's interesting about the networking thing, because I had a moment, I was speaking at a conference and I went into the trade show because I always try to, talk to as many people as possible. But I was having this like weird, introverted, insecure moment where I was like, I don't know anybody. Everybody's talking to each other. I feel uncomfortable. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm having this moment.
Yes. Everybody.
We're all having it. So
Yeah.
just embracing that. Like, listen, we're all a little insecure sometimes. We're all a little introverted sometimes. And just finding that one person to start that conversation with, I think can make the biggest difference in terms of your own energy.
Yeah. And I think you're making such a great point too, is that I always tell people, I always say, as uncomfortable as you are, pretty much everybody else in that room is that uncomfortable. And once you bridge and go up and talk to them, they're grateful because they need it. They didn't sort of have the wherewithal, to do it. It's funny. This person has emailed me 6 days in a row trying to post something on my blog. Oh. And now they're sending me the emails that say, didn't you get my emails? Why are you not responding to my emails? And I just think, how did we get so twisted and confused on relationships? I mean, do you think it's that people can hide behind email, they can hide behind social media, that they've lost the ability to feel the other person?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think there's a sincere lack of empathy and perspective in so many communications. And I do question, because at some point someone was taught to do that. Yeah. And I've seen it too. I've seen on my LinkedIn where there's constantly, and it's just this bombardment and it's this escalation of very, almost aggressive, but so disconnected messages. And so I think people think that the easiest way to get there is a straight line. And I get that. I understand that just making the ask and putting yourself in a very, aggressive position maybe works some of the time, but you have to recognize that the majority of us are looking for a little bit of nuance. Sometimes I want to write back and I just don't have the energy of like, do you really think that's going to work? Like maybe we should try something a little different.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest problems with relationship and connection is that we're looking for instant gratification, and that we've become an instant gratification world, and it just isn't the way relationship works.
100%. And we're not willing to put in the effort and the consistency. We don't go to the gym and expect all of a sudden the perfect body to, just magically arrive after one session. Yet so many times we expect that our, friends are going to stay around, that our colleagues are going to appreciate us, that, the people we work with are going to rehire us when we're not actually putting in the work to maintain that connection.
Why do relationships and connection matter? I mean, why are they something that is so important? What is it about, I'm obsessed with successful people. And if you watch the most successful among us, it isn't education. It isn't background. It isn't that, they got lucky on the front end. It is usually a relationship or a connection, and then a series of them, and then a small pool of people they stay connected with that continue to enhance their success. So what is it about all of that?
I just think it's why we're here. If that's not a part of why we're here, then I think I missed the book on that. Because, what are we without our connections? What are we without our relationships? And it's interesting, I love the word relationships because, it's funny when I say that I speak about relationships, people are like, oh my gosh, romance. And I'm like, no, everything is a relationship. Every connection that you have is a relationship that you can build or you can break. And at the end of the day, what are you most proud of? It's probably going to be relationships that you've built. It's probably going to be something that you've built because of relationships. And so not only are we wired for them, not only do we biologically need them, but they really are the catapult for all of our success in life. So
Yeah.
I just think they're everything, and they really need to have more of the attention paid towards it, because imagine if you actually started really, really paying attention to building those connections. Imagine if you really put the energy that you put into my skincare routine or
Yeah.
my workouts, or like all of the other things that absorb all of the energy in my life, my children, my spouse, all of these elements. What if we put it all into all of the other connections that we could build? Like, I can't even imagine how successful you would be.
Yeah, it's also, I always think of them too as the shortcut. Like I can sit here and I can try to figure things out, but if I can call you and you've already figured it out, or you can connect me to somebody, it just makes life easier. I think part of the challenge though is that it's sitting here and filling out a spreadsheet I can control and it's finite.
Yeah.
Relationships are messy. They're complicated.
Yes.
There's a whole lot going on. I've always thought if you treated a business relationship more like a romance, you would probably do better at it. You don't ask somebody to marry you, immediately. You celebrate the important times of the relationship. If you invested like that. What about for the advice to the young professional who is working in a hybrid environment? What about building the relationships that they need to advance their careers or learn the things that they need to learn? One of the things that I really feel like is missing, I know with a lot of young professionals I work with, is they're waiting for somebody to come up and tap them on the shoulder.
Yes.
And that's a nice thing, but if that happens to you, you're lucky. How do you put yourself in the driver's seat with that?
That is such a great question. And some of the research that's coming in after seeing the hybrid model pan out is that a lot of people who are choosing to go full on remote are actually losing opportunities for advancement, because it is a relationship business. Because if you aren't front and center, because if you don't have the bookends of, I saw this person then and I saw them again, and that recency of them, you're being looked over. And so if you are a young adult, and my son is actually, he's going to be graduating college soon and then going to get an MBA. And I said, you have to find a job that is in person. You have to find an internship during your MBA that's in person, because if you don't make those relationships now, I think we can do a lot online. I think we can create a lot of great connections on Zoom. I don't think you get from connection to relationship, because they're very different. If you think
Yes.
about it they're completely different. They're connected, but
Yeah.
they're different. Like, you can have a connection on Zoom. You can have a connection in a chat. You can have a connection on text message and email, but it's not a relationship until you have a meal. I say break bread with everybody. As many meals as you can have, if it's a coffee, it's a cocktail, if that's your thing, whatever it is, you have to build those relationships beyond just this filtered place. And that's where it takes it to that next level. And if you're a young adult, you have to find the opportunities. And if your company is not giving them to you, then you need to start creating them.
Yeah, such great advice. When I started my speaking career, the very first speaking opportunity I got was because a college professor called me, a local college professor, and said, I have my 4.0 students graduating. And that was back when all you could get was a 4.0. And she said they're texting people to try to find a job. Can you, and of course, nobody's responding to that. Can you come in and help? So it just is, even more proves that, boy, you can have the most amazing education. You can be top of your class. But if you missed the part on relationship building and creating those connections, then you're probably going to suffer in your career. What is hard to believe, but we are coming to the end of this podcast, and I always like to close with two questions. One is really easy. How do people get a hold of you? Where do they find you? And how can they find out more about Rachel, your incredible career, and all of your expertise as it relates to relationship building? But also the question, what is your greatest piece of advice to people who are struggling and wrestling with thriving in uncertainty?
Whew. Okay, I'm going to answer the first one because that
Okay.
one's easy. I'm Rachel DeAlto everywhere. So websites, Rachel DeAlto, and all social media is Rachel DeAlto. And I think that, the biggest biggest advice that I could give to anyone to lead them through anything is to follow your heart. And I know it sounds so corny and so Pollyanna, especially, when we're talking about business, but if we drop into our heart, we get rid of the ego, we get rid of the overthinking, we actually follow what is going to serve us the most. And you can be in the most uncertain moments, but if you tap into like, what am I actually looking for? Where am I going if I'm letting my heart lead? You won't be led astray. And that's something that I've followed as long as I can remember. And I don't think I've made a lot of wrong turns.
Yeah.
But the overall trajectory has been pretty amazing.
I think what's so interesting about that is because when I look at my life and I look at the wrong turns that I've made, I've usually made those turns with my head and not following, my heart and my gut instinct. And what you really have got to do is truly trust that journey. Well, it has been a pleasure having you today. Thank you again for being so open to coming back. I mean, all the last time we got into was your startup and the fact that you were an attorney. And I thought, gosh, we were just getting on the cusp of a really great conversation. So you have been an amazing guest. I hope you will come back again and join us for another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty to your competitive advantage. Don't forget to check out Rachel. You'll see her website right there below. We're going to have everything in the show notes, but you're going to want to check out her website, her master classes, and certainly if you are somebody who books conferences, book her for your next event. We'll see you next year with a new set of strategies to turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. See you next time.